Always true.
We ask the questions.
What is needed in the world?
Is that going to be?
Fighting against NATO in Afghanistan, the Haqqani network. Western leaders believe it's based across the border in Pakistan and may even, to some extent, be protected there. Last week, the United States designated the group as a terror organization and pushed through a resolution at the UN targeting it for global sanctions. But if you ask Pakistan's foreign minister, she'll tell you Pakistan has nothing to do with the group and resents the idea that her country is not doing enough to fight extremists.
6,000 soldiers. It has cost us 30,000 civilians. So nobody tells my nation or my country that we are a country which does not take this problem seriously.
The ability of extremists to keep fighting in Pakistan for their agenda was highlighted recently when a schoolgirl was shot in the head by the Taliban because of her campaign to bring education to girls. Again, many wonder why the government has not done more to protect her. Was there never any sense amongst the government that you'd let this girl down?
The government at least 3 different occasions offered to provide extra security or security. This is a huge wake-up call.
All of these issues serve to colour the perception of Pakistan abroad, and domestically the country is also facing stark challenges. Millions of people are living in poverty, and at the same time the country is spending fortunes on a strong defence that includes a large arsenal of nuclear weapons. Why is Pakistan spending so much money on making nuclear weapons? Today on Talk to Al Jazeera, a conversation with the Foreign Minister of Pakistan. Madam Foreign Secretary, thank you very much indeed for talking to Al Jazeera.
Pleasure.
The Haqqani network has just been, once again, specifically targeted by Washington. Your relationship with the Haqqani network, if I can put it that way,
Sure.
Is an interesting one.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think this new State Department directive will involve? How do you think it might be effective or otherwise?
First of all, on the assumption that our relationship with the Haqqani network is an interesting one, whatever the word interesting means or entails.
Well, I'm hoping that you'll elaborate on that for me.
Let me just give you a few clues to how interesting that relationship is. When the State Department decided to designate the Haqqani network as an FTO, we said they are not Pakistani nationals, they are Afghan nationals, and if the US so desires to do so, it is a call that the US must make or should make, and the people to consult would be the Afghan government. In the same way, when within the UN Sanctions Committee this issue came up, we did not use the many tools which are available to any country to use to come in the way of this designation, specific names of the organization itself. Now, what does that say? That says that the interesting relationship happens to be no relationship whatsoever.
Right.
Now, if some of these elements are distasteful, any element or any group or any entity which resorts to violence, whether it is inside Pakistani territory or outside Pakistani territory, can have no support from the Pakistani state. And I want to be categorical about this. I want to be categorical about this because I feel that the entire narrative on Pakistan today, the entire hostile narrative on Pakistan today is built on the fact that after the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan, Pakistan played a specific role. I do not want the world to forget that Pakistan may have been the frontline state then, but Pakistan was not the sole country which was playing that role and promoting the Mujahideen and allowing them to use arms and allowing them to, even worse, arm them with the mindset which we have not been able to get out of our country and of our region. You know very well that there were many countries within the region that I'm here today. There are many countries in the West, many large countries who were supportive of the same, the same deal, so to speak.
Can I stop you there for a moment?
So I just want to complete by saying that, therefore, associating us or Pakistan specifically when any of these groups will be an unfair judgment call.
Which was not what I was trying to do. What I'm trying to get from you still is a sense of, let me put it very simply, do you welcome what the US has announced about the Haqqani network, and will you cooperate with their imperatives?
As I did just answer, we have been cooperating. We have been cooperating in the UN. We have been cooperating, as I just said. This
well,
is not a call.
You
I
said
said it
that
very
you
specifically.
didn't use any of the tools that were open to you.
I said
that's
you
not
see,
a ringing
okay.
endorsement.
A ringing endorsement is that you will, if you're not coming in the way of something, what is that? Is that not a please go ahead and do? They are not Pakistani nationals. Please make that clear.
Right.
So Pakistan has no role to play in that. Clearly,
But
no role to play.
But do you
in
have
that.
any role to play against the Haqqani network, and what
We
would
have
that
a role
be?
to play, I have said, on any entities which resort to violence inside Pakistan. Pakistan has suffered more than 300 suicide bomb
But you
attacks
can't be
inside
more
Pakistani.
specific about that.
I am being as specific as is required. I am being specific in saying that any group that resorts to violence has not been and will not be supported by the Pakistani state. And please remember that Pakistani state and Pakistani citizens and Pakistani people are people who have suffered at the hands of violence and terrorism and extremism. So we are a country which is well aware of those challenges. We just want everybody to wake up to those challenges and not resort to, sort of looking for a shoulder to put the blame on, but to engage in serious dialogue to see how can we root out this scourge of terrorism from this region, and we feel we'll all do much better if we all put our energy to it.
Okay. Now, Malala Yousafzai, she, we are told, was targeted for having dreams that I suspect you had when you were her age. And you have spoken before about your desire to see young Pakistani women having the opportunity to achieve what you have achieved. How does it make you feel when there is a force in your country that is so powerful and apparently so out of control that girls like Malala are shot and given the country the exact opposite message that you're hoping to give?
I think what I felt was what any other Pakistani felt, barring a few exceptions. There was a lot of anger, there was a lot of disgust, and there was a lot of we will not be on the wrong side of this. The way I look at it is that what happened to Malala Yousafzai, first of all, the girl herself, I think what she represents is something which is pure. What she represents is a future of Pakistan that we all aspire towards. But she had the courage to stand up for that future. She was brave enough, even as a girl child, to stand up for that future. And for that, she has our respect, our salute, and our, heroic worship of the entire nation.
Is there any guilt in that?
Can I finish the first, statement or the answer to your first question? So that is clearly something which was across the board. The entire Pakistani nation felt that. Now, we are not a country and we are not a nation which has ever, hoodwinked the problem that we face. And the problem or the scourge of terrorism is something which has cost us 6,000 soldiers. It has cost us 30,000 civilians. So nobody tells my nation or my country that we are a country which does not take this problem seriously. And nobody tells my nation to be guilty of not standing up to this huge problem, because we are a country which has had the courage, sometimes single-handedly, sometimes being blamed by the rest of the world to be supporting terrorism while we are actually fighting terrorism, to stand up to this.
I was using the word guilty
and
more
therefore,
in terms of...
Therefore, it is important that we look at this particular issue in the correct perspective. So what she represents is a brighter, hopeful future for Pakistan. As I said, she was a girl who had the courage to stand up for it. And what they are trying to, as in the militant groups, are trying to impose is the opposite of the future that she holds for Pakistan. So I think in the reaction that you saw from the Pakistani nation, you saw a complete acceptance of the future that Malala Yousafzai represents, or the vision that Malala Yousafzai represents, and a complete rejection of the other vision which is trying to be imposed on us. And may I also share with you the fact which is not well known to many Westerners. And the fact is that despite their nuisance value, the religious political parties also have never even gotten a modest vote, so to speak, or a modest representation in the parliament unless they have been supported by one entity or the other. So if you look at Pakistani mainstream politics, it is consumed by people who are moderate. It is always supportive of people who are moderate. So what this shows is that it is the fringe which must not be allowed to represent Pakistan.
This is an incredibly big fringe, though, isn't it? I mean, the Taliban is a very powerful force within your country. Half of your country in the Waziristan area seems to be outside of your control. It's not merely a fringe, it's a major problem. The reason I used the word guilty was there never any sense amongst the government that you'd let this girl down? She was a public figure. She was well known as an outspoken critic of the Taliban. She was known to be under threat, and yet they managed to get her with no retribution and no comeback at all.
Sure. First of all, I think we have to be very careful on how we frame it, because when you say half your country in Waziristan, I hope you do know that 700,000 square kilometers is what is all of Pakistan. And Waziristan will not be even a single percentage point within that. So I hope you understand
your
the
terrorism
context
problem
of
is not
now,
confined to Waziristan,
fringe,
nor is the religious extremism.
And nor is it confined to Pakistan. The terrorism is a problem for the entire world. And we have seen that through 9/11. We have seen that through what has happened in Syria.
You're suggesting
recently.
there's only a fringe in Pakistan that is a problem.
That's exactly, you see, the point I was trying to make was that this fringe must not be able to define Pakistan. Okay, and what I said clearly was that if you look at electoral results in Pakistan, what you see is that the large majority of Pakistan does not vote for them. So what is obvious is that the Pakistani population, 180 million people, are not in majority, and the small fringe, however, has a huge nuisance value, which is the same as a mafia group operating in a normal country is able to create a lot of ruckus.
Sure, but the question was about Malala. You don't think you owed her a greater duty of care? If this is only a fringe, and
on
they were
that,
able
I wanted to get the geography right of Waziristan, and now on Malala Yousafzai. On Malala Yousafzai, you do know that the government at least 3 different occasions offered to provide extra security or security. Now that was a girl and a family which wanted to live a normal life. And I am not shirking away from the fact that this is a huge wake-up call. So when I say that we did whatever we could and we are doing whatever we can, I'm understanding the enormity of the challenge and saying that. But I would refuse to have my country be blamed to not stand up enough when we are a country which has had more losses than any other country, or collectively all of NATO and ISAF brought together. So we keep on hearing about the sacrifices of the soldiers of NATO and ISAF, which we respect. Any one person's loss is a loss to all of us. However, we are also expect Pakistan's sacrifices not to be taken lightly. The blood of our 30,000 civilians and 6,000 soldiers is no less dear to us than the blood of the other people.
You brought that up a few times, actually. The suffering of Pakistan, the number of people lost, and what I think you called, if I remember rightly, the hostility towards Pakistan and the history of blame that is being put on it for the religious uprising. You feel strongly about this. Where is this blame coming from, do you think, and who do you think is not allowing Pakistan its due respect?
I think it's a collective responsibility. So I can't really be able to name any specific country or region or area in any way. I'm talking just about the narrative that you see in the Western papers all over. And I feel that the narrative is self-correcting itself, because as people are, if you look at the last 6 months, the correction has already started taking place, because one realizes that the enormity of the challenge to us in a big way, Pakistan, because Pakistan has to face it on the ground, is aware of the enormity of the challenges, and therefore we don't shirk away from the responsibility of standing up to them. But a lot of other countries are obviously not as deeply aware of the challenges on the ground as we are, because they haven't had to come face to face on the ground with this challenge.
The hostile narrative that you speak of, though, is kind of a generic given in a lot of conversations by Westerners in particular. And you see it being manifested in a way, and perhaps the drone program will be the best example. The United States tends to try to stick to the line that no civilians have been killed by drones. They sometimes even try and pretend that the drone program is something they don't want to talk about. Does it not anger you and your government that the US feels able to present these kind of, I don't know how to characterize it particularly without offending too many people, but presenting this sort of policy that doesn't seem to respect Pakistan's own sovereignty and own nationhood?
First of all, when you take the office of foreign minister, you have to leave anger out the door. So I would like to say that nothing angers me.
But you do
And yet I
keep coming
use-
back to the
and,
subject.
And yet I use the word anger on Malala Yousafzai because that was a personal, as a woman, one has the luxury of feeling angry on the loss or on the attack on a 14-year-old in Pakistan.
Right.
However, when it comes to this particular program, as I said, I have spoken at length about it. And if I say that I am now more confident that we are moving towards a solution with the United States of America, I would consider that to be a fairly important, thing to say. And I think I would just like to leave it at that. There can be a difference of approach.
Could you at least put a time frame on the solution?
There can be a difference of approach. We look at it as something that might assist them in today winning the battle, but is certainly not assisting them in winning the war. We have said this many a time. I have said this in Washington. I have said it back home, and we feel that we are now engaging in a way where we are able to share our perspectives and move closer to each other's perspective than before.
Clearly there is a pressing need to do this because foreign investment in Pakistan is drying up extremely fast. Businesses in Karachi are complaining about lawlessness and the inability to make money. The general mood around the region seems to be souring pretty fast. Again, is there a time frame in which you can perhaps suggest that things will improve?
And yet through all of this, Pakistan is a country which is still growing at almost 5%. When you compare it to the European growth and growths in many other regions of the world.
Well, the IMF is saying that's going to slow.
Yes, and 5% can slow to maybe 4.5% or 4%. But despite the many challenges, and as I said, we are a country which is deeply aware of those challenges. And
you've also said that Pakistan is an extremely poor nation. So this kind of challenge is not the sort of thing that you need to have.
Absolutely. This type of, and we also clearly say that the requirement of a secure and stable Pakistan so that we can go on to our real trajectory, our real growth trajectory, and I can assure you that the government is trying to do its best to be able to do that. And in the military operation that we had in Pakistan also just 2 years back, the intention is exactly the same, that you ensure that you are able to secure Pakistan so that the normal flow of investment from outside, but more importantly from inside, continues.
You've spoken about the stability of the country, and we've focused about the external threat, or at least the threat from external actors. But what about the internal actors? The judiciary and the government have been going at each other fairly recently. The military is also part of what seems to be a fairly destructive triumvirate, if you like, in the governing of the country. How is that going to work itself out? Who is actually going to be ruling Pakistan come the next elections?
Who's going to be ruling Pakistan?
Governing Pakistan, ruling Pakistan?
Well, I mean, unfortunately, you have to wait for the next elections, which are going to be after March, most probably. So, but really, this is a government which takes great pride in the fact that it has invested its, sweat and blood into building institutions in Pakistan, at the cost of itself sometimes.
Institutions which seem to be at war with each other.
That's, these are growing pains. This is a country which has suffered for almost 36 years of non-democratic rule, non-constitutional rule. It is a country which is just getting out of 4.5 years of democratic rule. Give it some time. Every country, every nation deserves some time. We feel very strongly that the institutional building that is happening, the institution strengthening that is happening is going to be in the long-term interest of Pakistan. And what might be chaotic to a foreign eye, as it clearly is in your statements, is actually the Pakistani institutions finding their own place. For instance, let me give you an example. Parliament has this much space within the constitution. And what was the actual space that Parliament was enjoying in the many, many years of Pakistan's history? This much. So as it grows, as it expands its space, there is some space which has to be contracted. And this probably has to do with many other institutions.
The judiciary
also
just deposed your Prime Minister. Is that a function of parliamentary space?
No, that is not a function of parliamentary space. I'm just saying, as I said before, that we are a party, the Pakistan People's Party, and we are a government which is very proud of, at the cost of itself, strengthening institutions, because we understand that every institution needs time to grow, to mature. And sometimes, as I said, these are growing pains. We have to learn to live with them for the sake of Pakistan.
Okay, let's finish off with a look at the external situation again. You've spoken about how poor Pakistan is, how many calls there are upon the national budget. given that reality, why is Pakistan spending so much money on making nuclear weapons?
Pakistan is spending as much money as it needs to secure itself from external threats.
Pakistan has more than 110 nuclear weapons, and the US State Department
Like-
believes
like
that
any
number
other
will
country-
double within,
like any other
within the next
country-
few years.
Like
That's
any,
more than the
like
UK.
any other country, as foreign minister or as a Pakistani administration, we do not talk about our nuclear program and what and how and where it is.
But I'm talking about
But,
your expenditure.
we
you have
feel
major national security issues. You have major issues on the ground in terms of ordinary military capacity, ordinary policing capacity. I'm just wondering why the priority is a nuclear capacity.
Well, as far as
is this an
as I said,
indication of fear of threats from
As I
outside?
said, I'm not going to comment on that at all, so please don't make any wrong insinuations from what I'm about to say. But we have a parliament of 300 plus people, the lower house of the National Assembly, elected by almost 180 million people of Pakistan. They every year pass what is called the finance budget. In that, they make the allocations to the health, education, and other sectors, economic growth, other sectors.
But what
I
policy-
feel that they
what-
are
what
in a better
policy
place.
does
If
that-
I ca- if I'm
what
allowed to,
policy
if I'm
does
allowed
that
to,
government
if I'm
actually
allowed to,
enunciate
if
to
I'm
the
allowed
people?
to just end my statement, I feel very strongly that those representatives of 180 million people are better placed to make the resource allocations as they see fit.
Well,
if you see,
what
if
I'm
you see-
asking you is,
if you see in the last few years,
what is their justification?
if you see in the last,
Or
few,
is that- is
if
this
you see
decision
in the
made
last
behind
few years,
closed
because
doors?
these are all insinuations. If you see in the last few years, as a percentage of GDP, military spending and military budget has come down rather than gone up. Therefore, the trend, as I'm insisting, what is seeming to be chaotic to the foreign eye, is actually Pakistan finding its place. Therefore, the trend, the trajectory is right. The trajectory is right, and therefore Pakistan, inshallah, is on its way to achieve its rightful potential.
I clearly haven't made myself very clear. I just would like to know, you say these deliberations are made in Parliament and the decision for budget allocation is made in Parliament. So presumably that is, those deliberations to a greater or lesser extent are conveyed to the people. So I'm just wondering what message Parliament gives the people when they say we would rather spend money on more nuclear weapons than we would on more hospitals or more police.
I'm not commenting on the more nuclear weapon statement that you made at all. All
Well,
I'm saying is,
I'm
saying very
asking you to
categorically.
merely relay to me what Parliament has said in these deliberations. This presumably is a matter of record.
What Parliament has said is what I said just 2 minutes back, which is that as we have moved forward, we have given almost more than 100 billion rupees more to the provinces to be able to spend on education and health and sanitation and social services. That as we move forward, this is the first government which has taken out more than 100 billion rupees out of the national budget to bring or to make, for the first time in Pakistan's history, a real social safety net program which empowers the women of 7.2 million households. These don't make headlines. They will never make headlines on Al Jazeera or on any other newspaper or television,
Well,
because they're not fancy enough.
They're being
Because
broadcast
they're
now,
not,
but
absolutely.
it doesn't actually
It will never
address
make
my
headlines
question.
because it's not interesting enough, as you said.
No, it's perfectly interesting because
so,
that number
we find-
could probably be
Sure.
multiplied many-fold
7.2
if the
million
money was allocated.
7.2 million households from zero 4 years back is something that we hope to be proud
And
of.
you've already admitted that the country is still desperately poor,
Absolutely.
with millions of
Of
people,
course.
millions more people
Of
in
course.
need. So my question is the allocation of that much money to a nuclear weapons program?
So
a
the
useful use of-
priorities are made accordingly, and as I have said categorically, that military spending as a percentage of GDP in the last few years, especially in the last 4 years, has decreased. So it is on the right direction. Spending on the social sectors has increased exponentially in the last 4 years. So we are very satisfied as government that we are spending the Pakistani resources where they deserve to be spent.
Are you satisfied that the nuclear weapons that you do have are correctly guarded and are in no danger of falling into the wrong hands?
We have said this repeatedly. We have a very strong national control and command authority under which they are, and as no other nation, we don't need to say more than that.
Is there any reason why Washington seems to find that troubling?
I think you should have to ask Washington rather than Islamabad.
Is that not something that
And
comes
I'm
up
not
in
representing
conversation?
Washington if it did not occur to you.
Is that not coming up in conversation?
That is not coming into conversations.
But they're bringing it up in the media.
Well, I can only comment on what I know.
Okay. We'll leave it there then.
Thank you.
Madam Foreign Secretary, thank you for talking to Al
Thank you.
Jazeera.
Yeah.